Archives of Prasar Bharati presents the timeless treasure of Golden Era.
My guest is the American actor Richard Gere. He's familiar to audiences in India with films such as American Gigolo, Pretty Woman, Officer and Gentleman, Yanks. Unknown to us, Richard is no stranger to India. Richard, you come to India quite often. What brings you to India?
Well, His Holiness, obviously. You know, I've been a student of His Holiness Dalai Lama since, I think, like 82, 83, something like that. And some years I come here 2 or 3 times a year for teachings, whether it's here or in the south, in Mungad. We're in Dharamsala right now, by the way. You didn't say that. But.
What has been your relationship with His Holiness, and in what ways has he impacted your life? 82 means 13 years is a long time.
When you meet someone of that stature, I think it's impossible not to be affected on every possible level of your existence. Your mind and heart are totally transformed. You know? I've heard rumors that there was someone who met His Holiness and was not transformed, but it must have been very long ago.
In what ways has he transformed you?
You know, Buddhism is I was just talking about it today, actually. There's I think especially the Gelugpa school of Tibetan Buddhism, which most of my teachers are Gelugpa teachers. There's a lot of work on the mind and intellectual play and the exploration of reality itself using language and using pure logic, along with meditation and various techniques, you know, from meditation on sutras to tantra. It's a gradual process of the mind being familiarized with another way of seeing things, and hopefully the correct way of seeing things, and becoming habituated with that, the same way that our minds in our normal state have been habituated with the wrong view. So it's a process that takes certainly lifetimes and lifetimes and lifetimes, but within a lifetime, one can see gradual change. And I think the gradual change is something you can trust. So we see a gradual opening of the heart, kind of loosening of the bonds that create a kind of egocentricity towards altruism. You know, not that you can make that kind of giant leap, but you start to move towards that. And as you do move in that direction, as the arrow of your energy starts to move out, you feel a totally different environment inside and outside. You see how the world changes as your mind changes. Now the other aspect of mind, the wisdom aspect, has its own voyage to take. And as you start to realize that perhaps the absolute reality, concrete reality that our senses tell us is out there and in here, maybe isn't so concrete after all, but is in a state of constant fluidity, you know. So again, these things take step by step, little by little. The taste of it starts to intoxicate your being and your mind and your actions, your thoughts, your feelings.
You know, do you feel a conflict between the dharma and you know, when I was introducing you, I was almost tempted to introduce you as a Hollywood star, and I held back. Do you feel a star?
No, it's a peculiar thing, because people aren't actors, they think it's something different. The same way, I suppose, I don't really know what it's like to be a jet pilot, you know, so I project on what that would be like. Essentially, it's a job. You know, it's one that it has a creative aspect to it, it has a very technical aspect to it. Sometimes it's drudgery, sometimes it's great fun, but it's a job. Happens to be what I do in this lifetime. Other lifetimes, there are other jobs. You have your job, these guys all around you have their jobs. You can't pan here because it's not lit, can you? But there are other people here doing their jobs, which are just as interesting to them as mine is to me. So I don't see any conflict there. People really are people and are dealing with the same problems, which is suffering. First noble truth is what we're all still dealing with, how to come to terms with it, try to understand how it happened that we found ourselves in this state, find a way to neutralize those causes which created that effect, and then trust a path that is going to take us out of this thing.
In what ways, you know, you mentioned that the Dalai Lama was a remarkable human being, and you have spent a lot of time with him as a student. What really is the kind of role or contribution that you believe the Dalai Lama is making?
You know, I've introduced His Holiness many times with
What do you say?
engagements, and I change it every time because it's I could take any tack with him and it would be true. He's the most simple man I've ever met, and he's the most complex man I've ever met. He's an artist and he's a farmer. You know, he, like any great mind and heart, he's able to engage each of us on the level that we exist. He said something the other day. He's been giving these teachings on Shantideva, who was the great, I think it's 9th century Indian monk who was at Nalanda University, one of the great universities in the history of the planet. And one of the great flowerings of Indian culture. And he said with total directness, and something that cut right through me, he said, I've never thought I was better than any other creature. And when he says that, you believe it. You know, I can say that, but it's not really true. You know, I've had my times I thought I'm better than him, or I'm less good than him, or whatever. His Holiness sees all of us without our masks, and he's never had a mask. The only thing he's lumbered with is Dalai Lama. You know, he's got a job. That's his job. You know, you're interviewer tonight. I'm interviewee tonight, and the Dalai Lama is Dalai Lama. But outside of that one title, he's a totally fluid human being who engages the heart and mind of you wherever you're at, and is able to do it with such grace and humility. I think that's the mark of a real teacher, a real friend. You know, I think you engage him on a similar level that I do, which is confusing sometimes because we do political work with him. We do kind of social, responsible work with him, charitable work with him. And we see him as a teacher, a spiritual teacher, and we see him as a deity. And it's something that's hard for us who aren't as developed as he is to flip roles as quickly as he can, as effortlessly as he can. So that's a bit confusing sometimes, and I feel like I'm just starting to be able to do that with him. His switch from talking about organizing a teaching in New York and then seeing him as Chenrezig. It's difficult.
You know, you've mentioned this aspect of being an actor as being a job, of the Dalai Lama doing what he's doing and doing a job. What satisfactions does doing your job as an actor bring to you? I mean, you have several options in terms of the kind of job you could do. You performed on the stage before you came onto film. You used to play musical instruments somewhat proficiently. You could perhaps have been a musician. What satisfactions does a job give you?
Well, you know, the first thing that occurs to me is the fact that I'm able to live many, many lives at once, and each life is an opera. You know, I don't have to live a life of 70 or 80 years looking for the few high points of that life. I live condensed, very intense lives in the theater or in films. And in that way, I think there's a lot of growth possibilities, depending on what level I give myself to it, really commit myself to it. You know, I hazard to say this, but in a sense, Tantra, giving yourself, you know, to the role. You really can live many, many lifetimes within one. And it is high opera, there's no question about it.
How do you go about preparing for a role?
There are many different ways. I think I have a few things that I have in common when I do. One is photographs. Now, obviously, if I'm doing something before photographs, it makes it difficult, but even then, sometimes I can. Like King David, for instance. You know, I find photographs of Morocco or Israel or Yemen, you know, when it was still pristine, which was fairly recent, and I can get a feeling of what it would be like. Or I go travel there and have my own experiences, which I can pull on. I think there was one, I'll give you an example, in the film Summersby, which I don't even know if it's played here yet, but some of it took place in the American Civil War in the 1860s, 1870s. And I looked through a lot of photo albums, and it was a war, the first war that was photographed. Camera was common then, and everyone was taking photographs. And there were a lot of kind of stiff photographs because of the nature of the camera. People had to hold a pose for a long time because the film was very slow. So people tended to have those kind of rigid things. Now, I felt that there's something false about this, that it wasn't really capturing the reality. And I started finding photographs where people were moving, they were blurring, because they refused to just stand still. And especially with the Confederate soldiers from the South in America who lost the war. And I was playing Confederate soldier in the movie. And I found this one photograph where there were these 3 Confederate soldiers, and they were leaning against a wooden fence out in a field. And they were really cocky, and there was nothing stiff about them. They were like totally relaxed and a totally kind of arrogant, pumped up young man energy to them. And they were slightly blurring. They were moving. They were not going to stop their energy because there was a camera there. And I found it really potent in terms of the character that I was playing and in the time. I find ultimately that you really want to key into the mental space of a character, which can be defined in many ways, how intelligent they are, but also their life experience. Sometimes they're not the same thing.
Do you find there's a correlationship between your practice of Tantrayana, where you sort of where you cultivate the ability to visualize the deity and become the deity, and to become a character? Is there an interplay?
Well, I was
in
an
terms of the
actor
skill?
before I was practicing Tantra, so, but I did find that there's something similar there. You know, in what we call the generation and completion stages. You know, we call the generation stage essentially a rehearsal. I don't know if I should be talking about this. I don't know if His Holiness would like this. You rehearse, in fact, the Yidam in his universe, like when we're doing a play, or like I was describing getting into these characters. The difference being that this character you're rehearsing is a deity, is a purified deity who's born of emptiness, born of shunya, which is quite different than playing a normal human being. But I think the internal process, the kind of emotional leap you have to make, is similar. So this is all your rehearsal period. This is your generation stage. You're getting used to the deity in his universe, his mansion, his mind. And there comes a point, I'm told, where one leaps into the completion stage, which is opening night. You're going to jump off the mountain, see what happens. It's a lot of similarities, certainly. I don't think there's anything in spiritual practice that is other than life. You know, I think that's something that it's taken me a while to catch on to, but there's no spiritual technique that is alien to my body and mind, and alien to my life, alien to relating to other creatures, whether people or animals or spirits, deities, or whatever they may be.
In terms of coping with the reality of being an actor, really being a star. You are a star in terms of the public's perception of you, in terms of the public relations that goes into it, the human relationships that are interwoven with public relations.
I've never been comfortable with any of that. And certainly when I was younger, I was extremely uncomfortable with that. So much so that I would sometimes find myself in altercations of not wanting the camera in my face, or being shoved around by paparazzi, or being noticed in a restaurant, or any of that. I found it a violation. But I began to realize that it was a fact of my life. It was foolish of me and childish to think that that was not a reality in my life. And frankly, being around His Holiness taught me a lot about that. His grace, dealing with exactly the same thing, but obviously a much higher plane. Seeing how he dealt with it, always with compassion and grace and generosity, that there was never a stain. He would go through a crowd, and no matter what happened, they felt good, he felt good, there was positive energy generated, and because of that, there was nothing left over. Everything was burned in the process. And I think I've learned this technique at this point that I can exist with the baggage of being an actor now, and actually feel that there's some positive energy being generated out there in interactions that could, I think, earlier in my life would have been potentially negative.
Richard Gere, the successful actor, if this were to run out, what do you think, what else might you do?
I'd probably practice a lot more, for one thing. Music has always been a very strong element of my life. Now, it's a lot in my acting has to do with music, I mean specifically playing instruments, but also there's a musical sense to the way I work. I see things as an improvisation, as one would take a theme, a melody, and chord structures and play with that. I think very much so. I think my body has a rhythmic aspect to it.
What musical instruments do you play?
Most anything with strings I can handle. Guitars, bass, you know, really the string instruments I'm best with, and keyboards, piano are my things, yeah.
Mm-hmm. You've been in and out of India very often. You know, what impressions of India do you carry? Or do you just come into Dharamsala and with His Holiness and leave?
Well, usually it's that way. You know, I come into Delhi, maybe spend a day or two, and then get up to Dharamsala, which is getting easier. You know, there used to be the day where it was really tough getting up here, as you recall. And now you can get a plane coming in here. In some ways, I kind of wish it was the old days, where you really had to make this heavy commitment to get up here. And when you got here, you didn't know where you were going to stay, or if there was going to be food, or whatever. Now it's a kind of a posh trip, relatively speaking.
Well, you know, you leave tomorrow and
Anyhow, if you want to get back to the Indian thing.
Yes.
Yeah, I really don't know that much about India. I know I've been down to Mungad a couple of times, which is near Hubli, and where the Tibetan community was started, I think, in the early 60s, and kind of carved out of the jungle. And there's a very vibrant Tibetan community there that is flourishing, and rebuilt monasteries that were destroyed by the Chinese in Lhasa have been rebuilt down there through the kindness of the Indian government and Indian citizens who've been very, very kind to the Tibetans and helped make them a very successful refugee community. You know, certainly one of the most successful, probably in the history of the planet.
Do you find you're recognized in India when you travel? Do you enjoy greater privacy here?
More privacy. I get it here, but I shouldn't say this because it'll probably get worse if I say something. It's just the paparazzi are not so bad here. You know, it's like in Europe, they follow you around and really harass you. It's like swarms of mosquitoes around you, and it really makes it impossible. No, it's much easier for me to practice here and to study and have a private life. Yeah. Absolutely.
What do you go back to when you return? Do you have another movie? You have.
Yeah, right now I'm leaving tomorrow. I've stolen this time, this 2 weeks to come and take this teaching with His Holiness, but I got to go right back into final casting and pre-production on a film which we start in about 3 weeks.
What film is this? Could you tell us about it?
This is called Primal Fear, and it's about a lawyer, kind of a hotshot lawyer who. Kind of cynical about the system, has reason to be cynical about it, and defends most anyone who has the money or the famous case that will bring him more notoriety. And he takes on this case of a boy who, by all the evidence, clearly killed an archbishop in Chicago. But there's something about him that my character doesn't think he did it. And it becomes increasingly complex with mirrors inside of mirrors and the idea of illusion and reality. He starts out by saying, you know, what is real is what I make the jury think is real. That's the only reality there is. And by the end, we're not so sure.
Well, you just made this comment about the press and being hounded out here. And I perhaps wouldn't be forgiven as an interviewer if I didn't ask you.
Oh no, he's going to do one of the questions.
So I shan't ask it.
No.
I should yield the floor to you and say what you have to say. What you go back to in your own life, in your personal life.
Personal life?
Yes.
I'm just saying, I don't even have a personal life anymore. I really don't. I've been working so hard. I just finished a movie in England, which was 7 months of a long but good shoot. Hard, but a good shoot on a movie called First Night, which is about Camelot and King Arthur and Lancelot. So I play Lancelot. It was a lot of fun with horses and swords and all of that. And starting this movie right now. But in the meantime, I spent a lot of time with His Holiness. You know, I was in Mungad in January. I had a great time there. Kala Chakra initiation there. And then this time here in Dharamsala. You know, in fact, I'm thinking about, I probably shouldn't say this either, but I'm thinking about getting a permanent place here in India. I like it so much.
Well, if I was sort of a wish-fulfilling gene and I gave you sort of 3 wishes on which to enter this, sort of end this program, what would these 3 wishes be that you'd look for?
Oh,
I've let you off the hook on the personal question.
What? I've dealt with this for many years, pal,
sure.
so there's no way you would have gotten that one through. 3 wishes, that's really easy. Is happiness to all beings, number 1. Happiness to all beings, number 2. And number 3, happiness in the causes of happiness to all beings. No question about it.
Well, Richard, lots of happiness to you.
Thank you
very much indeed.
Thanks a lot, man.
Thank
This
you.
was easy.
Thank you.
Thanks.